Hi, welcome to Baddies for the People. I'm Cheyenne Hunt.
And I'm Rachel Pearl Jacobs, and we're your resident bad bitches, here to give you the tea on everything from politics to pop culture.
So buckle up, because we're two attorneys with a lot to say, and we're here to share it with you.
Unapologetically.
I think there's obvious tea with us today. And the biggest piece of tea in our life is that we're starting a brand new podcast and that we're going on this journey together. And we have a lot of tea to spill to brand new listeners who are curious who we are and how we got here. We got here recording Baddies for the People with a lot of intentional, painstaking, argumentative conversations and work, trying to figure out what the vision for this project was going to be, and eventually to land on this name and how we were going to be here together doing this. And I think it's a good idea to talk about this name, because it was this was tea for us big time. The tea on how we ended up being the Baddies for the People.
Yes, because Cheyenne came up with this name. So first of all, you need to understand that it was pitched to me as Cheyenne's idea for the name for the podcast.
Did I really come up with it?
Yes, you came up with this.
Oh my God,
and then, you were like, yeah, I really like Baddies for the People. Like, I was thinking, at first I was like, bruh. And then I was like, oh yeah, I really like this, because people just, as I thought about more about what it meant, I was like, oh, this is so out of bounds and kind of edgy. And Cheyenne was then like, yeah, I don't think Baddies for the People is the name at all.
Yeah. Well, because immediately, I remember this now. I did come up with it. I fear that it was I. I came up with it because I was like, that's badass. Like, that's a badass bitch thing to do, to like be out there and proclaim yourself a baddie, and to be okay with that, knowing that the idea for this podcast was that we're both attorneys and that we're going to have nuanced, intellectual conversations about things going on in the world, and to give you a really nuanced woman's perspective. And then as soon as I really sat with the way that society could interpret that term baddie, it freaked me out, because I thought about all of the ways that women who are sexualized are inherently devalued.
And then I reminded her that we would be sexualized anyway, so she didn't need to worry about it, because it was still going to happen regardless of what our name was.
Unfortunately, as women, inevitable. But I don't know, you gotta remember my background. I come to this off of a run for Congress and from working on the Hill, and spending a lot of years with a lot of people who tell you you have to, as a woman, present in a certain way, and especially not in a way that is inherently feminine, in any way sexual, or that could be sexualized. And so I felt it immediately. All of this fear came up for me, but Rachel, over literally like the course of a month, radicalized me to embracing our status as baddies for the people.
Exactly, because I will always be the wokest baddie in your ear, encouraging you to make the questionable decisions. Because what's that quote about boring women don't make history? It wasn't boring.
Well-behaved.
Yes, which is boring. But well-behaved women. Exactly. Like, if people are going to have an issue about something about this podcast, they might as well start with the name. Like,
at least what does Kamala Harris's mom say? Don't let them tell you who you are. You show them who you are.
Exactly. And I'm a baddie for the people. Okay? So I am Gen Z's civil rights litigator.
Oh my God, branded.
Yes. So I sue the police and the public entities, also individuals who violate other civil rights. But because of qualified immunity, you can't actually sue the officers. So I sue the police.
I am an attorney that has worked literally all over the place. I started doing political organizing and groundwork in California, in Colorado, trying to get big money out of politics. I worked for the United Nations doing human rights law and humanitarian law when I was in law school. And then I went and worked on the Hill. I worked for Senator Amy Klobuchar. I worked on the first impeachment of President Trump. And then I worked on the Hill in a bunch of other capacities, writing bills and trying to get them passed. And then I was the first Gen Z woman to ever run for Congress. And I ran in California's 45th district. And then I lost, which unfortunately happens when you run for office. It can. And it was always a long shot. We knew that we were trying to do something pretty unprecedented and try to shake up an institution that was pretty resistant to it. And then I really kind of had to figure out what was next. That hit me really, really hard. And it's hard to maintain hope after something like that. And I have a lot of shame over the fact that it took me a minute and I had to sit in the side. I sat on the sidelines for a while. And it's
shame about
not being like as resilient as I had hoped I could have been. You know, like I didn't brush myself right, get back off and get on the horse.
So?
You know, it took me a few months, and I learned a lot about burnout in that period of time. And spoiler alert, maybe we'll talk about it later, I didn't take care of myself to the point where I have like iron deficiency anemia that I've been dealing with and trying to like actually figure out what a balanced work life looks like. So
a balanced life.
Wow. Whoa. Holy fraudulent slip. I just told on myself so bad.
But I think that's kind of how society has prioritized and like instilled value in women. Like, I think that's also why we're baddies for the people, because we get up every day and we like try to do something that we care about.
Yeah.
But then also like there's this piece where we feel like that's where our value lies because we didn't go the traditional route. So it's like easy to look at you not winning as a failure instead of looking at it as like a huge opportunity. And like, you know, to go up you have to go down first because everyone like bends, you know, and that could definitely be your springboard. I mean, it has been your springboard. Yeah. How many followers do you have?
Yeah, like 130,000 I think right now.
Yeah, that's like a lot. I have like 0 because I actually haven't made my like professional looking social media because I have anxiety about it, and apparently that means I'm avoidant, but
it's okay, we'll get there. What made you cringe this week?
What made me cringe this week was that people really believed that the hurricane was actually used to cover up that they're digging for lithium deposits in North Carolina.
Who's digging for lithium?
That wasn't really clear to me. Maybe the immigrants. Let me check.
If you don't know who the conspiracy is targeting.
No. The conspiracy is targeting
it's
the
almost
victims of the
certainly
hurricane.
Targeting immigrants too. If it's a right-wing conspiracy, it's almost certainly targeted at immigrants.
The government is bulldozing the community of Chimney Rock, North Carolina to get at its lithium deposits.
This is like a conspiracy that's going around? What do they want the lithium for?
You're asking a lot of questions that they don't have the answers to. This is just something they made up.
Okay. So is this part of the thing we're going to talk about later, the overall theories that the hurricanes were man-made or intentionally caused to cover up some kind of government agenda?
Well, not all of them say that, because some of them say that, you know, this is a real horrible hurricane that happened and it's a natural disaster, but the immigrants took all the FEMA money and we've run out of funding.
Which is also not true.
Or that you can only get $750 even if your house is completely destroyed, which is also not true.
You can get $750 before your application even gets approved to buy food and to make sure that you are good until your application is reviewed. at which time you are much more likely to get full support.
But my brother's cousin's sister's husband on Facebook told me that Joe Biden is purposely denying any area that is Republican.
So that's got to be the truth. Hey, that's how we found out about the Haitian migrants in Springfield eating cats and dogs, was because it was someone's cousin's, neighbor's, daughter's friend that saw something, and now that's everywhere, and that entire community has been terrorized for months.
I thought the lady that put that on Facebook just admitted that she made it up. She did, and she apologized.
She apologized for posting it because she said that it was like whatever she heard was so like removed that she had no reason to know that it was true, and that it had gotten like far out of hand. She didn't straight up say she made it up. She probably did and didn't want to like fully catch that heat, but she was like, yo, like I heard this from 6 degrees removed, and this has gotten so blown out of proportion. What made me cringe this week, a little less serious, but still serious, Trump was on a podcast this week. I think it was Andrew Schultz. And is that who it was?
I don't know.
He's a comedian, right? Andrew Schultz?
The one who just got canceled for saying all those terrible things about black women? Is that
Yes.
the one?
Yeah. So
Two for two.
Trump was on Andrew Schultz's podcast, and he meaning Andrew Schultz, was asking him questions about Barron, because Barron Trump has started school at NYU. So he starts off this segment by saying, you know, Barron, he's 18, he's wealthy, he's, you know, a man, and he's been let loose on New York. He's in New York City. Are you sure that right now is really the time that you want to reverse Roe v. Wade? And Donald Trump starts laughing. I swear, he actually started laughing. And then,
Because he's evil, bro.
yeah.
And then he said, I don't care, because New York is a Democratic state and they're never going to ban abortion, so it doesn't matter.
He might as well. He also might as well have said the truth, which has always been true in this country, which is ban it or not, there will always be abortion for the daughters and the mistresses of powerful men.
Even if it requires a coat hanger.
Always. Oh no, they'll get a doctor to do it under the table. There will always, coat hanger abortions are for people who are desperate. That's like below them. They will always be able to pay off a doctor. Also, like, it made me cringe that Andrew Schultz like didn't actually do a substantive follow-up on that. He just kind of like laid that out there and let it be funny, which, like, you're a comedian, but also you're talking to somebody that has a serious impact on the human rights of a significant part of the population, and you don't want to ask a follow-up after that? I don't know.
I think he only booked that interview after he shamed black women on the national stage and created a small international incident and a diaspora war between the black Brits and the American Brits. So he did his harm to the black community to the requisite level to be able to intrigue Trump's campaign. For the next segment, we're going to talk about the vibes and how Taylor Swift is no longer a vibe. She's been erased from the public eye since she endorsed Kamala. Rude.
Is that true? Okay, so here's what I'll say. I haven't seen her around as much. I haven't seen discussions of her as much. I also, interestingly, like, even just in watching football when it's on in my house, don't see, and I live with people who are Kansas City fans, and I'm not seeing Taylor Swift get shown at the games anymore either.
It's the conservatives suppressing the media.
Do we know if that's true?
No.
Yeah, well, let's not
Hey, listen, I'm giving my vibe, and that's the vibe that I get.
You sound like JD Vance right now. You said there'd be no fact checking?
Excuse me, miss.
Okay,
yeah, there's no fact checking on the vibes. The vibe is they are suppressing Taylor Swift's speech, and
because she endorsed Kamala. That's your vibe.
Because we, the catless child women, rose up
Catless? Wait.
in unity.
I thought it was childless cat ladies. We're catless. Low-key, though. I don't have a cat.
I'm a catless child lady.
And I can barely take care of myself, so I guess we are catless child ladies. My vibe is that I get asked a question a lot, having worked on Capitol Hill. Whenever people learn what I do, that I worked in politics, that I ran a campaign, that I was on Capitol Hill, everybody always says...
Did you go to sex parties?
No one's ever asked. That's not true. People have asked me that. No, I didn't. I heard that was all on the other side of the aisle.
People asked you that?
Oh, yeah.
So, like, I heard... Okay, keep going.
So, the question I always get asked is, of all of the television shows that cover politics, from The West Wing to Scandal to House of Cards, what is the most accurate to your lived experience? And I always say Veep. And it's making a really strong comeback right now because it follows Selena Meyer, the main character played by Julia Louis-Dreyfus, follows a super similar arc as Kamala Harris stepping in to become the Democratic Party nominee. And so it's like given this show a great new life. But I say that it's the most similar in kind of a derogatory way because that show is genuinely like It's Always Sunny in Philadelphia, but for politics. Like, everybody has bad intentions and they are reckless and don't think things through and barely qualified to have their job and constantly stepping on each other's toes. And that is genuinely what working in politics is like. It's a little bit better if you're in like a senior senator's office on the Hill.
Or if you have diversity.
Yeah, certainly. Which I didn't experience a lot of because that's still not on the Hill.
Well, exactly. But
I was the only woman in my whole office and I worked for a female senator.
The diverse candidates at least have to be overly qualified.
Yeah. But the way that people run around with their heads cut off, the way that they're all sharking for themselves, and it's genuinely just like that. And it sounds
like working for a talent agency.
That is the most LA thing you've ever said. So when you watch Veep and you go turn on HBO, I encourage you to first sit and think about the fact that someone who has worked on the Hill, who has worked advising the White House, is telling you that that's genuinely not that far off from how our government functions. And then watch it, because suddenly it watches much more like a horror movie than it does a comedy. And yeah, that's my vibe. Now that that Veep has come back into the zeitgeist, that people should know that that's what it's like.
Well, that's dark. Every week on the show, we're gonna do a deep dive on an important topic that is complicated, that no one feels like reading about, but we're gonna try to provide a digestible yet comprehensive analysis of.
We're gonna trade off doing these deep dives, and this one was mine, and I'm gonna call it Nightmare Hurricanes. Not because the hurricanes themselves were a nightmare, but because how the discourse around these things has unfolded is something that we need to deal with as a culture, because we're on the verge of making this a lot worse. Many notable people on the internet, including elected officials like Marjorie Taylor Greene, have been spreading mis and disinformation about Hurricanes Milton and Helene. Specifically, they have been claiming that these hurricanes were caused by some kind of government weather control machine. They've been... This is really...
It's called cloud seeding. Okay, bro.
Yeah, I'm not like that deep down the Q pipeline.
Just know that if there's an internet conspiracy theory, I'm your girl.
Well, get ready, because what I'm about to say might shock you. They just might be right, but for all of the wrong reasons. So they are insisting that in the face of these historically strong storms, that they could not be possible but for human intervention, which is really funny because I love watching conservatives go so far right that they almost circle back around to the point. And that's what we've done here. When they say that these storms are so strong that they couldn't be possible without a human cause, there is, in fact, a human cause for Helene and Milton, and it is rampant, unmitigated climate change. A brand new study on both hurricanes Helene and Milton found that global heating, like at the levels we're experiencing right now, has made these storms 200 to 500 times more likely. According to Bernadette Woods-Plackey, the chief meteorologist at Climate Central, the heat that human activities are adding to the atmosphere and oceans is like steroids for hurricanes. That's an exact quote. So in the wake of both these storms, hundreds of people have lost their lives. Hundreds more are missing and unaccounted for. There's 2 million people still to this day without electricity in the state of Florida. And the White House has said that so far the damage just from Milton alone is likely to cost our economy more than $50 billion to repair. So this is not like we're in a great situation. I wanted to do all of that. I wanted to lay that groundwork to have this conversation. A conversation that hasn't been had yet that I've seen in big public media about Project 2025. We've all heard a lot about it, from the federal pregnancy trackers to the infusion of the government with conservative Christian nationalist values. But what we haven't heard are the immense details included in this report that would absolutely decimate our country's climate response and our plan for dealing with the most serious issue of our time. It's nefarious. It sets out to eliminate climate regulations and destroy the emergency response services that save lives when these disasters strike. So, Project 2025 starts by advocating for a whole of government unwinding of U.S. climate policy. That's a quote, whole of government unwinding. This strategy includes stripping government civil service employees of their labor protections so that they can be fired en masse and replaced with unqualified political appointees who will simply do what they've been told to do, not what the job demands of them, which is absolutely terrifying, because if you know anything about the federal administrative state, for the most part, political appointments are rare and people are hired on merit. Because these are very technical jobs. You need to know what you're doing and have an education in that specific thing, have qualifications to be able to make these informed decisions. And the idea of totally cleaning house with people who have been in these jobs for multiple administrations, who know the projects that are underway and the goals that we have to achieve, to replace them with political loyalists who have no idea what's going on, no institutional knowledge, and to completely dismantle all the progress we've made is terrifying.
So wait. Before you keep going, I think we need to talk about what that will mean in reality. Because when you talk about firing en masse, there's no way that there will be party loyalists lined up to fill those positions. So what we're actually talking about is a halt of all progress.
Yeah, massive vacancies.
All functionality of the government. Yeah.
That's a really good point, because, yeah, they'll have some, but enough to fill thousands of positions.
It's actually just going to be a giant hole.
Yeah.
And then things won't function. A whole of government unwinding is not just about climate policy. It's not just about abortion protection. It's not just about whatever the specific section that we are talking about in this moment. It's also the broader goal for the mission of this entire project.
Yeah.
And that's really heavy.
Yeah. No, it is. And that's a really good point, because that was not limited to climate policy. That's their vision for the entire federal government. So with that in mind, another important piece we had to get through to understand their plan and how quickly they'll be able to enact it. I want to thank the Berkeley Law Center for Law, Energy, and Environment for their incredible work compiling an in-depth report on all of the ways that the 900-page tome, manifesto even, that is Project 2025, will impact climate policy specifically. It's a difficult thing to read. There's a lot in there, and it's depressing. So thank you for combing through it. And if you guys want to learn more and take an even more in-depth look than this deep dive about this issue, you'll find citations for all of these proposals in that report as well, and we're going to link it in the show notes. The section on climate change starts out strong by stating that this is a quote, "The Biden administration's woke climate fanaticism must be reversed and scrubbed from all policy manuals, guidance, documents, and agendas, and scientific excellence and innovation must be restored." So there's a lot to break down there. If you think that the Biden administration's approach to climate is woke and fanatical, we're just really starting on the wrong note here. I mean, we're talking about really moderate climate goals. And not to discount the substantial progress the Biden administration has made compared to other administrations with climate policy. However, woke and fanatical is a crazy label for that. Also, a return to scientific excellence and innovation. What is their definition of scientific excellence?
Wait, I have an answer.
Okay.
Creationism.
Ooh. Burn. I was going to say they just think it's excellent when the scientists that are paid by the oil lobby just tell them what they want to hear. So I think that's what they're hoping for. Then they jump right into their first major goal, which is dismantling the administrative climate response, which again includes massively reducing the regulatory burden on polluters by lowering standards set by the Department of Energy. This is interesting because if you look at standards set by the Department of Energy, that actually also means the regulations that consumers really benefit from on an individual level. So on a household level, the Department of Energy regulates how much power our appliances can use. If you eliminate those standards, you end up opening the door for working families to get charged way more on their energy bills because they're being sold pieces of junk appliances that don't have to meet efficiency standards. And what's going to be available on the market isn't going to be competitive because once you take the guardrails off, one thing that companies will always do is cut corners as much as they can to save costs. And they're going to start marketing these things to low-income families who are going to get forced to pay those bills.
I advocate for free market economics. Free the market. Let them do as they do. Competition will, make
the invisible
everything.
hand of competition, which has worked so well for the vast majority of people, and the record wealth inequality in this country will somehow suddenly completely change direction and start benefiting us.
It's just like trickle-down economics.
The biggest myth of them all. They also want to gut regulations of gas pipelines, which would inevitably lead to more underground leaks and destroy the environment and threaten our water supply, which sounds great. I also hope you like cancer because they placed their biggest target on the EPA's regulation of air pollution, water pollution, pesticide use, and chemical disposal rules. So, I think it's a really strange take to say that we want dirtier air, water, soil, but, let's go for it. Also a strange take from the people that are like anti-vax and like, what are you putting in my body? But also, let those forever chemicals leach into my water supply. This is a weird vibe from them.
See, I just feel like this is all lip service because they already said they're firing everyone. So
how are you going to do any of this
when there's no one to enforce the policies? That tells us where we're really going. We look at this and we're looking at it as a drastic reduction in the gigantic policies that are already in place. We're still talking about this like there will be some pseudo oversight or pseudo protections.
Yeah.
But there are no protections if there's no one to be a watchdog. Yeah. I mean, the whole point of the government is to be a watchdog of corporations. The government doesn't own these large corporations. They don't own the oil companies. They don't own Teflon. None of the mass polluters, the people who are out here killing people, like the Aaron Brockovich story. I don't think people understand that if we gut government workers and government regulation, there's no court either. So there's no lawsuits. So when your kids start coming out, I don't even know how to describe like the deformities that they caused, because I don't want to make light of it, but you're not even going to have a remedy. Yeah. You're not even going to have access to a remedy to be able to pay the price gouging from the pharmaceutical companies that will sell you whatever medications you need to survive because your body can't process something, or your body doesn't know how to excrete or do something, so your lungs are filled with they're trying to kill you. I don't know how else people could say it.
Also, if you don't like all that cancer and all those cancer causing things being in our land, air, water, don't worry, because you won't know about it. They want to keep us in the dark about how these policies are going to literally kill us by limiting the scope and scale of all of the EPA's scientific research. So it's very similar to the COVID era Trump policy of stop testing, because when you test, it runs up the numbers. So they're just going to stop the scientific research being done by the EPA so that we don't actually know how quickly their policies are killing us. That's on to their next big goal, which is to reverse whatever progress we've already made, including, like I referenced, defunding the Office of Science and Technology's Policy Climate Research, eliminating the Interagency Working Group on the Social Costs of Carbon, stamping out, quote, climate extremism in U.S. foreign aid programs, which is particularly nefarious, because essentially what that means is the aid that we're giving right now to nations that are dealing with the brunt of the cost of rampant climate change, which we as the United States are one of the most powerful contributors to on a global level, as these countries that are not really contributing or very little contributors are suffering. We are going to also revoke that aid. Abandoning our role as a global leader on climate change by withdrawing from all international agreements on climate, hurting our relationships with allied nations, and also emboldening all other countries to disregard their climate promises without consequences. So this, to me, actually ends up being one of the most important ones, because this is symbolic more than anything. We know that when we make these climate agreements, like the Paris Accords, a lot of times, the United States included, countries that are involved in this will miss their goals. But there is something that happens on an international level with accountability when we as the United States show up to the table, and it forces other countries to do so as well, to continue to have legitimacy and play in the economy and the globalized economy that we all live in. And the second the United States withdraws from all of that, they'll crumble. This to me is by far the most nefarious, because this essentially says we are willing to completely sacrifice the next generation and all generations afterward for the benefit of the fossil fuel industry. The third major theme in their report is, great segue, prioritizing corporate interests. This includes a massive focus on protecting the fossil fuel industry, ranging from eliminating federal investments in alternative energy sources to allowing private drilling on public land and in delicate natural environments. So for those of you who are concerned about protected species, endangered species, this is going to fly in the face of that. If you're concerned about indigenous lands, reservation lands being respected, usually Native Americans and their communities are the first to be targeted with these pipelines, because it is the land that these folks care the least about. And I would not be shocked if we saw pipeline projects running through their land and it's their groundwater that's getting tainted. One of the things that they say in the report is that they're moving away from renewables because they are, quote, an eyesore. They also, which we care about here deeply in California, pledged to change the focus of the Forest Services program to promote private timber logging as opposed to actual wildfire management. So it's definitely more about the profit of the logging industry than stopping people from losing their homes and or lives in wildfires, which are going to become more and more common.
It's a good thing we here in California have prisoners to do that.
Oh, damn.
Unless you vote to eliminate involuntary servitude.
Yeah, definitely. Definitely vote.
But you know, it's controversial out here, getting rid of things like slavery.
Yeah, I know. If all of that wasn't enough, the cherry on top is their proposal to gut FEMA, which, if you don't know, is the Federal Emergency Management Agency, which helps us prepare for, protect against, respond to, and recover from disasters.
Unless the immigrants steal it all.
Yeah, that is the conspiracy these days. Obviously, Project 2025 is a nightmare, but that's also not to say that what's going on the other side of the ticket is perfect, because it's not. I am going to vote for Kamala Harris enthusiastically, and I am also going to advocate on day one, when she is elected, to have stronger climate policy than what she has currently put out, and to deeply disagree with this weird change she has decided to take on fracking.
Yeah, I threw up in my mouth a little at that, like the fracking thing. I was just like, this is why I could never be a politician.
I'll tell you what, it
was popular.
Sucks.
I don't know if it was popular though. I think that I would rather a candidate who is who they are, and like I don't have to agree with all of their stances, versus like the carefully curated digestible moderate. Because people get so tired of unseasoned food that they go for Trump. Like, we do not need more Cheetos.
I'll tell you what, though, from somebody that's been on the inside of the beast and on a campaign myself, it's really hard to think about what's at stake in your individual race and be okay with the fact that who you are as a person is out of sync with what it's going to take to win. It's really hard, because then there is a sense of personal responsibility for the fact that because you wanted to go out there and be yourself, a climate denier, a MAGA extremist is in the House of Representatives.
But that's not your fault. That's the American people's fault. You can't blame people, or you can't blame yourself for other people's selected stupidity. Yes, selected, because it's a choice that they make.
Yeah, but at the same time, if people knew better, they would do better. And a lot of times, people come to the decisions that they make because of a lack of, or whatever level of experience and education and worldview and what they were raised with. And when you come into a race and you're running for office or you're working for a candidate, you can't change any of that. That's your point A. You can try to you can contribute to a larger societal shift by pushing the boundaries, but there is a calculation on how far do you push it before you essentially do a disservice of not acknowledging where point A is and end up handing a seat of power to somebody who knows and will acknowledge where that is, will play on those weaknesses, will manipulate. It's hard too, because polling's not perfect, but there's what you perceive they want, and then there's like people who come to your office and tell you, I understand that this is what you believe, but 86% of people in your district support this thing. Full stop. What are you gonna do? It's hard. It's hard. It's not black and white. And there are things that I would go back and do differently, both on campaigns that I ran and in offices that I worked in. But
it's interesting. You're talking about like whether or not like you're for the people or for yourself. And that's why I'm not a politician, because I will gladly advocate for the people in court, but I will not
betray yourself.
Yeah.
And you shouldn't have to.
But I don't think you are betraying yourself. Like, I think that like sometimes we forget that politicians are public servants and their role is to represent the collective, not themselves. So that was an interesting way to think about it. But it's also definitely why I am so glad you're the politician of this duo.
For our last segment, we like to talk about what's been living in our head rent-free since the last time we talked. So Rachel, why don't you kick us off? What's been living in your head rent-free that you just can't let go of this week?
What's been living in my head rent-free is the secret lives of Mormon wives, but it's how they totally excluded Michaela's illness and how deeply it's like impacted her life, her self-esteem, the way she looks at herself. It just does a disservice, because if we're talking about what these women's lives are and what they're experiencing, that is such a huge part of so many women's lives. So many women, disproportionately actually women, are afflicted by autoimmune diseases.
And chronic illness, complicated chronic illness, diseases that have no known cure, very little treatment, very little research.
No known cause, but also no known, like so many things are called irritable bowel syndrome and like arthritis.
Yeah, and they don't know like what it is at all.
Yeah, and it manifests in so many different ways. You can't tell me it's the same thing.
Yeah, and when you hear like this little tidbit that they just skid past in her story, that she was like 16 years old and her husband is like a full adult, or her boyfriend at the time is a full adult man. She gets knocked up. They get forced to basically be married while she is a minor. And then she has this horrible chronic illness. Like, there's a through line there. Like, this culture that they live in where women are fighting to not be property. This TikTok page that exists, that's Mom Talk, exists for them to try and not be property. And this woman is dealing with this horrible chronic illness and fighting through it. And we're not even talking about it because we're too busy talking about whatever is going on at Swig or at Chippendales. Like, seems kind of crazy.
That is definitely like an overarching thing that I'm realizing, is that lots of women are doing things just to try to reclaim their agency and assert their personhood, and they're demonized for it. It doesn't matter what they're doing. I don't know. I don't see men who, even like the Ben Shapiros of the world, who literally go on like social media and talk just to degrade and dehumanize other people. Like, men do not get the level of hate that women do, like,
No.
off the bat.
No.
Just like, oh, you showed up, you're a woman.
Facts.
Like, how can I shit on you and your self-esteem?
Yeah, 100%.
Which is also why Baddies for the People was important, because people are going to comment on our appearance regardless. So I might as well
tell them who we are.
Yeah, and yeah, I might as well tell them who I am. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, for my rent-free this week, I want to talk about how insane this video is of Melania Trump that the campaign put out, where she is essentially saying that she supports some form of abortion rights and reproductive choice. And there are a couple of reasons why this video is insane. Purely on an aesthetic level, the lighting on her face, you have to go look it up if you're not like in your car right now and you can safely go look this image up. Half of her face is like in the darkness. It looks absolutely insane. When Anderson Cooper watched it on live TV, he laughed out loud and had to apologize because of how weird it looked. So the aesthetic is very strange. But from my experience in politics and campaign strategy, what I can tell you is that this is weird, because it seems like his campaign is trying to make a bet to try and soften Trump's image on abortion politics, which they know is widely unpopular. And they're thinking if they can put his wife out there and show that she is sympathetic to the issue of women's rights, and her first line is, "What does my body, my choice mean to me?" The strategy seems to be they think that this is somehow going to help him, when in reality, well, first of all, Melania Trump has almost no political capital. She's widely like unpopular and has like no pull with most people, because she doesn't speak out. She's not super involved. Two, it just makes it look like there's a weird rift between Trump and his wife. Like, I don't understand how they thought this was gonna like be a service. Someone asked me, do you think she just did it on her own? There's literally no way.
That was me.
Was it? Oh no, not me putting you on blast. But there's literally no way. Because for them to create this kind of content of her, to have it professionally put together and put out, like the campaign would have absolutely seen it and been a part of scripting it and producing it and putting it out.
Wait, she was Miss Universe?
I think so.
I didn't realize that. Wait, okay, I'm still looking up this video because apparently I'm struggling and I haven't been able to find it yet.
It's rough. It's really weird. You'll have to look it up. The first image of it is hysterical. That's what's been living in my head rent-free. And with that, I think it's a wrap.
With that, stay blessed, stay bad, and catch us next time on Baddies for the People. Ding.